is, why are Africans reluctant to leave political power? Why is it that they cling on to power even after decades of ruling a particular African country? We've got leaders in Africa right now who've ruled for more than 30 years, and some even more than 40 years. And you have to wonder, and I'm not picking on any particular African country, but you have to wonder why that is the case. And I think there is an explanation which can come from the angle of just the fact that we do not have an established inheritance. And so it all comes down to inequality of income and inequality of capital. And the failure by most African countries or African governments or economists to come up with a way in which they can be a guaranteed inheritance. Now, if you look at, if you read the book Capital by, is it Piketty, or there's an author who wrote a book called Capital, okay? And in that book, he talks about inheritance. And this is what I get from the book, in that it has taken Europe hundreds of years, to create an inheritance which can be passed on to future generations. The name of the author is Thomas Piketty. That's the one I was thinking of. He also looks at America and how America, to begin with, did not have that inherited capital from previous generations, but they were able to catch up when the rest of Europe was fighting the First and Second World War. So they were able to come up with their own inherited wealth, which could be passed on to future generations. Now, the problem with Africans, especially my generation, is that we have hardly inherited anything from our parents besides the education which we are appreciative of. Not that they did not want to, but they were just not able to provide us with the kind of inheritance that our peers in Europe, in Western Europe, in America might have. For example, a 40-year-old in the United Kingdom is probably about to finish paying off their mortgage, when at the same time a foreigner who's come into the United Kingdom might process a mortgage in their late or mid 30s, for example. So that means from the age of about 35, if you add 25 years, that's 60 years, which means they reach retirement age when they are still paying off a mortgage. This is not the same with their counterparts who live half their working lives without a mortgage because they've finished it. And so you see Africans do a lot more work because they are trying to catch up with their European counterparts. So the point is that there is lack of an inheritance by political leaders because they have inherited nothing, and then they accumulate some kind of inheritance, usually through stolen property or through corruption. So they accumulate these farms, they accumulate companies, they accumulate a lot of money, but that money is not guaranteed protection if they leave power. So the only thing they have is political power, and that's the only guarantee that they have to keep that inheritance. Okay? So there's lack of security guarantees from those people who are taking over power. So if a new government is coming in, there are no guarantees that the new government is not going to take away the stolen property from the previous government. So the only way they can guarantee the protection of their own inheritance is to stay in power. And the thing is that they are in charge of the voting process since they are incumbent. Okay, so they have the advantage of incumbency, which means they are able to rig elections in their favor, whether it's through stuffing ballot boxes, or it's through voter intimidation, or it's through providing less polling stations in places where the opposition is strong and providing more in places where the opposition is weak, which means that they get to their own supporters get easier access to voting than the opposition. And most of the time, the long queues in urban areas where the opposition is usually strongest, the long queues are discouraging to those people, to those urban voters. So some of them do not bother to go and vote because of the long queues. Okay, so I think there is an element of greed from politicians in Africa, in that when they take over the government, or when they won the wars of independence, they became greedy because they had nothing. So the sudden access to Western capital, to Western money, to Western goods and services, to worldwide travel, the fact that they are the ones who had access to donor funding, for example. Okay, I think that greed led them to accumulate a lot of assets, and now there is the fear of not only their own personal security, but the security of those assets which have accumulated, and also the lack of access to future funding from Western donors, because I think the West is also complicit in encouraging or in making it difficult for Africans to leave power. Okay, because there is that access, and they know the next person is going to have the same access and they will not, because we've destroyed the systems which guarantee that protection. We've destroyed the confidence in the public services that would guarantee. For example, the pension fund is non-existent in Zimbabwe, for example. Someone dipped their hands into the pot and there is nothing there. So imagine if politicians leave power and they know there is no money to look after them in retirement, and also their children are not guaranteed of inheriting those assets because they may be taken away by the incoming government, especially if it has taken such a long time for such a government to get into power. They are likely to correct all the wrongs that they have witnessed that have been committed by the current government. Okay, so political power is the only guarantee, and elections are the only democratic way to make sure that there is at least international support for their continuous stay in power. Because if the people have voted, the people have voted, whether they've been rigging or not, but the result says this person has won, and the international community is likely to support that win, whether the locals disagree or not. But for the sake, even regional leaders like African leaders can decide to support the guy who has won just to maintain the peace in the country and in the region. Okay, so political power gives politicians access to Western donor funding, especially to pay civil servants. You'll be surprised that a lot of civil servants in Africa are paid using donor funding from Western countries. And of course, there's a catch for the Western donor funders. They get something in return. They get lucrative mining deals and stuff like that. And the only bad thing is that they are not paying enough taxes as foreign-owned companies. Okay, so political power gives them access to Western donor funding, but it also gives them control of the police, the army, the secret intelligence, the air force, all the security apparatus. So the longer they are in power, the more they have infiltrated those state institutions. Okay, because of the difference between a state institution and a political party and the government. The government means the political party taking control, while it's still in government, taking control of the state apparatus, state institutions, and using them for the good of the country. But when a new political party takes over government, it means they take over the state institutions, but they do not belong to the political party. But in a country where a certain political party has been in power for a very long time, it means that it is difficult for people to even notice or know the difference between the government and the political party. So the government becomes the political party, becomes the state institution. They see that as one and the same thing. Okay, but they also have access. The politicians in Africa, they have access to the central bank, and sometimes they start using the central bank as some kind of a personal bank, where they will print, they will get money coming in through taxes. They will get that money and use it for their own, either for political campaigns or for worldwide travel. Okay, so this is just some of the reasons why Africans are reluctant to lose political space or to leave political power. Very important to have that political power. And now, because a political party has been in government for a long time, it is difficult to see how you can separate the economy from politics. But the truth is that in countries such as the United States, countries such as the United Kingdom, you will get very powerful companies literally employing a lot of people and driving economic growth and development. Okay, but in Africa, we still believe that political parties are the answer to economic issues. The truth is that they have no clue, most of those guys. The only problem is that they do not encourage independent economic thinkers to express themselves freely without the fear of being labeled an opposition supporter. Okay, so these are just some of the things that I think encourage political people who want to stay in politics forever, career politicians. They are encouraged to stay in power because of greed and because of fear. Thank you for listening.